something red is creeping onto the screen. Small, with an Audi badge. It took them 8 years, but we've finally gotten the second generation. The smallest Audi, the A1. The interesting thing with this car is that the base model costs 20,000 euros. And if you fully equip it with everything, you can come up to about 43,000 euros. That's a lot of money for such a tiny car. So you might ask yourself, why would I spend so much on something so small? Well, then you drive it. With new lines, the A1 got its modern shapes. The front mask now looks more like the rest of the new models, but the thing I like the most are the LEDs. Despite being so small, this car really has some interesting design features, one of which are the LEDs. For some reason, I really like how they look. They're quite aggressive, and these black lines in the middle just make everything even better. But it's not just the front ones, it's the rear ones as well. They also look pretty darn good, I would say. They also have these black lines in the middle, and they look very clean. For some reason, they remind me of the A6 or the A8. You'll have trouble finding such cool LEDs with other cars from this segment. Audi A1 unfortunately didn't escape the new engine badging, so this tiny 1-liter 3-cylinder one is now a 30 TFSI. I don't like the new nomenclature, but people who like to show off will. I've heard of instances where someone asked if the car really has a 3-liter engine. The interior offers gadgets reminding you of bigger Audis, like the digital instrument cluster and a big infotainment screen. You can choose from a plethora of different seat designs, wrapping them in cloth or leather. The center armrest is an optional extra. You'd think the rear wouldn't have a lot of space for the rear passengers, but they never complained. Now for the most important part, how it drives, and is it an Audi? I'm really sorry, but I'll have to talk about the price right here, right now, again. Because let's face it, if we think about it logically, it's pretty insane. The price. For the price of a base Audi A1, you can pretty much get a base Mazda 3, which we know comes with a lot of basic equipment and is a bigger car, arguably better looking, potentially a more powerful engine, and you know, it just doesn't make sense to buy something like this then. But I think you cannot just think about the price just with logic. You also have to think about the heart, what the heart wants, and so on. So for example, if you're someone who already owns and drives an Audi A6 or maybe even an Audi A8, for example, then buying an Audi A1 probably isn't such a big problem. And if your son or daughter just did their driving test and you want to buy them a car, then this is not such a bad choice then, after all. especially if you want your son or daughter to also drive an Audi, because it's a little bit more luxurious and you know it's going to be safe, well built, and so on. And especially if you're also the type of person that will test drive the car yourself before buying your children that vehicle. Okay, now that I got the price out of my system, let's actually test the car. And the first thing that really surprised me was how it looked. Yeah, it looks okay on the outside, especially the LEDs. I really like those. But the inside is perhaps even more surprising, because I think they did a lot with very little. I especially like this sort of cliff out of this soft touch material on the top of the dashboard. For some reason it really works well. And then down here with this plastic, they said, well, we're not just going to put plastics under here, we're going to give it like this honeycomb texture. And I think it's really interesting. I like it. Then you've got the climate control, which is Audi's climate controls. I like these a lot. The mechanical switches are so nice to the touch, and it just looks very clean and lovely otherwise. I've got the S-line steering wheel, which is a little thicker, and it's got a flat bottom, so it's lovely to drive. And I've got a digital instrument cluster, although this one doesn't have the navigational package, so there's not a lot over here I can see apart from my fuel consumption, radio, and so on. But you know, it's nice. The one thing I don't like, I like the infotainment screen. It's basically Audi's infotainment screen, which is good and works fast, works good. But the problem is, of course, the actual glass over it. It gets so dirty, it attracts so much dust and fingerprints. Under a certain angle of light, it just looks disgusting unless you clean it all the time. Let's talk about this engine. Second gear, 50 kilometers per hour, full throttle, 80, 90. I'm just gonna start with that. 1 liter, 3 cylinders, 115 horsepower. And it definitely feels more than that. It does. I'm actually quite surprised. I always say in these videos I'm not a fan of 3-cylinder engines. I still aren't. I still am not, but they can surprise you. And this one does as well. It's got plenty of power, I would say, for this car. And yeah, it can be fun, a lot of fun while you're driving. But the thing is, if you start driving very economically, for example, I drove through some suburbs very slowly, very carefully, and I got it down to 4.1 liters per 100 kilometers. And I would say that's pretty good. I'm not going to say amazingly excellent. Oh dear, where did I go now? Roadworks, major roadworks. Yeah, it's not amazing because it's such a tiny little engine, but you know what? For the performance it offers with 150 horsepower, I would say that's very good. Right now I have 4.3 liters per 100 kilometers, considering I was driving mixed, so pretty much in a city, in the suburbs and out of the city, no highways though, and that was pretty good. If you hammer it on the highway or the freeway or the motorway, man, so many names, you're going to look at around 6 to maybe even 7 liters per 100 kilometers. But like I said, if you hammer it like a maniac. But this is, I would say, pretty good. It's surprisingly nice to drive, and especially if you're driving normally through a town or the suburbs or whatever at low RPMs, about 1,100 to 2,000. Yes, it doesn't have a lot of torque at all down there, so if you need to do something in an emergency, you better shift up, or shift down really, because you'll need that torque. But if you're just driving normally, it becomes very civilized and almost imperceptible. one more thing. If you take the 6-speed manual gearbox, you will not be disappointed. I'm not, because it is so lovely to shift with it. It's such a nice, precise, not clunky, but sort of chunky mechanical feel. But at the same time, it's light enough so your kid or whoever is going to be very pleased with it. They'll be able to have lots of fun if they want, even in the corners, without feeling like they're trying to, search for gear in a slush. This is excellent. Good work, Audi. One more thing that you might find a little bit funny, but I really like the sound of the doors and the blinkers. I don't know if you'll hear that, but I like that sound. It's the Audi's blinker sound, but it's really nice. And the doors, of course, that sound, it just sounds very solid, very high quality. From the outside as well, all 4 doors. You'll never think, oh no, am I closing a 1960s Fiat or something. So what I'm trying to say is, despite the fact that yes, it's got more plastics, hard plastics than your usual bigger Audi would, for example, because it is a smaller, cheaper car, everything is built very solidly. It sort of exudes quality. And I'm not trying to say it's more prestige than an Audi A6, not at all. Right now, you can choose between a 95, 116 or 150 horsepower petrol engines, with a manual or automatic for the latter too. The base A1 starts at 20,000 euros, while the top-of-the-line one with the most powerful engine comes up to 46,000 euros.